I was a nurse working the night shift at a big hospital. It was a few months ago, and I thought I knew the place well. I had been there for a couple of years. Nights were always busy and a little creepy. This particular shift started off like any other. The lights buzzed overhead, and I moved through the hallways, checking on patients. About an hour into my shift, the lights flickered. Everything went dark for just a moment. I felt a chill wash over me. When the lights came back on, I looked over to Mrs. Harris's room. The bed was empty. I was sure she was still in there when I last checked. Did she get up? I felt a knot in my stomach. My coworkers laughed it off, saying I was tired. But deep down, I knew something felt off. The second blackout happened a few shifts later. I remembered how shaky I had felt the first time. This time, the lights flicked out again. Panic set in. I rushed to check on the patients. As the lights returned, I walked into Mrs. Harris's room again. A completely different patient lay in the bed. I blinked and rubbed my eyes. "Where's Mrs. Harris?" I asked the new patient. They just stared at me wide-eyed. I turned to check the charts on the wall, but her name was nowhere to be found. My heart raced. I walked out and checked my clipboard. I wanted to tell the night nurse. She just smiled. "You need to rest. You're imagining things." I felt cold, like someone was behind me. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. It sent shivers down my spine. The final blackout came a few nights later. The moment it turned dark, I felt panic rise. I hurried down the hall where soft machine beeps echoed. But there was more than just the machines. I heard whispers. I couldn't make out the words, but they chilled me. I stopped outside a room. My eyes were drawn to a dark figure near the wall. "Do you need help?" I called, but nothing came back, just silence. When the lights flickered on, I was alone. I rushed to find my coworkers, my heart pounding. Something felt very wrong. Shadows darted in my peripheral vision. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Days passed, but I couldn't forget those blackouts. They haunted me. I started to doubt reality. I tried to talk to my coworkers, but they dismissed me. They thought I was just stressed. I wanted to scream, to tell someone about what I had seen and felt, but I didn't know how to explain it. Then came the whispers again. This time they were clearer. They whispered my name. I turned to look. Nobody was there. I felt frozen. The hospital seemed to be hiding something, and I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover it. Each night became a nightmare that I couldn't wake from. I needed a break from it all. After the whispers and the relentless dread, I decided to take a night off. I called in, hoping some time away would clear my mind. But as I settled into my apartment, watching mindless TV, I felt uneasy. It was as if the hospital was tugging at me, still weaving its dark thread through my thoughts. The shift after my break, I was back at the hospital. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, but they felt dimmer somehow. I walked the familiar corridors, yet they felt foreign, like a maze with no clear exit. I was on edge, expecting another blackout or worse. At around 2 a.m., I heard the familiar sound of flickering lights. For an instant, I shut my eyes, bracing myself for the dark panic that followed. When I opened them, the lights remained on. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by confusion. Why hadn't they gone out? I shook my head, trying to dismiss my anxiety. But as I walked past the nurse's station, I could see a group gathered in hushed conversation. "Did you hear about the new patient?" One nurse said quietly. I paused. New patient? I hadn't seen a new admission. My heart beat fast as I moved closer to get more information. "What about her?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "She came in last night." "Strange case, very strange," another nurse replied. The way her eyes darted around made me nervous. I shifted my weight, my curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "They say she was wandering around the hospital before she even got admitted." The nurse's voice dropped to a whisper. No one was supposed to let her leave her room, but she did. They found her just standing in the hallway, staring at the walls. Creepy stuff. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My gaze turned to the hallway where the patient would be. "What's her name?" The nurse shrugged. "That's where it gets weird. I don't know. I've never seen her charts." It's like they just appeared out of nowhere. My heart raced with dread. I glanced around, half expecting the lights to flicker out again. I needed to see this new patient. I excused myself, my pulse quickening as I walked toward the room where they kept the ever-elusive patient. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, the light spilling into the darkened room. The patient lay in bed, her eyes open and blank. She looked directly at me, yet seemed to see right through me. I felt a chill creep into my bones. Then it happened. The lights began to flicker again. My heart dropped. I glanced away for just a second to gather my thoughts, then turned back. The bed was empty. Suddenly, the whispers returned. They echoed in my ears, clearer than ever. "Help us," they pleaded. My breath quickened. I stepped back, scanning the room in panic. Where did she go? And who was us? Just then, I heard a noise behind me, a soft padding like footsteps. I turned, but there was no one there, just the dark hallway stretching behind me. I didn't want to see what was lurking in the shadows. I rushed out of the room, my heart pounding fiercely, terrified of what the hospital was hiding. I stumbled back into the corridor, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. I realized I needed to regroup, to find something familiar. The nurse's station was just down the hall. I forced myself to walk, steadying my nerves with every step. When I reached the station, the nurses were still there, their conversation now hushed but urgent. I blurted out, "Have you seen her? The new patient?" They turned to me, eyes wide with surprise and concern. One of them, a nurse named Karen, nodded slowly. "She's not in her room?" "No, she was there." And then hold on, another nurse interjected, her voice a blend of curiosity and fear. "You saw her? What did she look like?" I hesitated for a moment, the image of those vacant eyes still fresh in my mind. She was just staring. Then the lights flickered, and I turned back, and she was gone. "All the staff has been on edge about her," Karen said, biting her lip. "We're not allowed to disturb her. The doctors think there's something off about her case." But they haven't said what. "Something off? Like what?" Karen glanced around. "I shouldn't be talking about this. Just keep your distance. If you hear anything unusual, report it immediately." Unease settled over me like a heavy fog. I nodded, feeling an urge to leave. "I will." As I turned to walk away, I heard a quiet murmur, almost like a whisper, skimming the edges of my awareness. I paused, straining to hear. It was coming from the break room nearby. My heart raced. It wasn't just my imagination. I had to know what was going on. Creeping toward the break room, I hesitated at the door. The whispers escalated. They weren't just pleading anymore. They sounded distressed. "Help us. Please." I flung the door open, heart pounding. The room was dark, lit only by the dim light of a single overhead lamp. Empty chairs surrounded a table, but a piece of paper caught my eye. It lay crumpled on the floor. I picked it up. It was a page from a medical chart, scratched out notes and incomprehensible scrawl. But one word stood out: asylum. My stomach twisted. Had this patient come from somewhere worse? Then I felt a presence behind me. I whirled around, but the room was still empty. The whispers grew intense, growing louder, but the words seemed tangled and incomprehensible. "Get out," I yelled, but the darkness only swallowed my voice. Suddenly, I was shoved hard from behind. I stumbled, almost hitting the wall. Fear flooded my veins. The door swung shut, slamming on its own, trapping me inside. Pulled at it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me, clamoring for escape. That's when I saw it. A shadow in the corner, shifting and swirling, solidifying into the silhouette of a woman. She stood there, just out of reach, eyes still hollow, staring right at me. Couldn't breathe. I needed to get out. But what if the whispers weren't asking for help at all? What if they were a warning? The figure loomed closer, and I was frozen, rooted to the spot by a mix of terror and confusion. Each shallow breath felt like a betrayal to my instincts, urging me to flee. But I couldn't move. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like prey caught in the gaze of a predator. Who are you? I finally managed to squeak out, trying to keep my voice steady. The woman's shadow flickered as though caught between worlds. The whispers surged, clamoring in a chaotic symphony of panic and despair. Help us. The chorus surged through the air, but like before, the meaning eluded me. My heart hammered a warning or a trap. Get away from me, I shouted, trying to find my voice amidst the mounting dread. The silhouette twitched, and I felt a sudden rush of cold air wash over me, followed by a dreadful silence. In that moment of stillness, the door creaked open slowly. Light from the corridor spilled into the dark room, illuminating the walls around me. My blood ran cold as I saw the reflection of countless faces in the shadows, the distorted expressions of those who might have once been patients here, eyes wide and mouths moving silently. I didn't want to wait for them to manifest completely. I bolted toward the doorway, pushing past the threshold and sprinting down the hall. My pulse raced. I had to escape. As I made my way back to the nurse's station, the whispers began to fade, but the feeling of being watched burrowed deep inside me. By the time I reached the station, I was breathless and frantic. I looked around, searching for Karen. We need to find her, I panted. The new patient. She is not right. Karen's face twisted in concern. What happened? The break room, I don't know. I saw someone. I felt like I was trapped. It was wait, you saw her? Karen interrupted, her eyes narrowing. What did she look like? Sensing the urgency in her voice, I forced myself to recall the details. She was just standing there, and the room felt like it was freezing. I know she wasn't alive. And the whispers, they weren't just from her, they were from everyone. Before Karen could respond, a nearby alarm blared to life, echoing down the halls. The nurses sprang into action, their calm demeanor shattered. Code Blue, one of them shouted. Patient in room 203. Room 203? I repeated, panic striking anew. That's where the new patient is. Ignoring the rush of medical staff and orders buzzing around me, I bolted toward room 203. Each step felt as though I were trudging through molasses. Dread clawed at my throat. What am I walking into? When I reached the door, I hesitated, instinct screaming at me to turn back. But the urgency of the situation pulled me forward. Just as I was about to push the door open, I heard it again, a whisper, threading through the chaos. Help us. This time it was different. It wasn't just a plea. It felt like a summons. My hand lingered on the doorknob, trembling. With the room shrouded in uncertainty, I finally swung the door open, gasping at what awaited me inside. Room 203 was dimly lit, the shadows stretching across the walls like long, dark fingers. The air was thick with tension, and I could hear the low murmur of voices, frenetic yet eerily calm. I stepped inside, heart hammering wildly as the door creaked shut behind me. The patient bed was unnaturally still. The new patient, a girl who couldn't be more than 19, lay there. Her skin was pale, far too pale, and her eyes were closed as if she were merely asleep. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was not merely dreaming. I took a cautious step closer, a mixture of curiosity and dread pulling me forward. Suddenly, the whispers I had found so unsettling before intensified, now swirling around me like ghosts of the unspoken. Help us, they implored, echoing in a chilling harmony that made my skin crawl. I spun around, desperate for the source, but the room was empty aside from the girl. Are you all right? I asked, my voice trembling, but there was no answer. I looked back at her face. Her expression was serene, almost peaceful. Yet, something deep inside me screamed that this tranquility was a facade. Then, the room flickered. One moment it was real and solid. The next it seemed to warp and bend, and I could hear the cries grow louder. Help us! Help us! They were coming from everywhere now, echoing off the walls, drowning out my thoughts. As I stumbled backward, I felt something brush against my arm. I whipped around to find the shadows had shifted, coalescing into the dark figure I had seen before. It was closer now, its features indistinct yet hauntingly familiar. I was entranced, unable to pull my gaze away. "Help us," it whispered again. Only this time I didn't hear the pleas as words, but as a shared memory. Faces began to emerge in the dim corners of the room, faces I recognized. Their lips moved but no sound came out, just those haunting whispers that burrowed deeper into my mind. I had seen them all before, people who had suffered or had their lives cut short. The panic flooded back into me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The shadows swirled faster, and I realized they were converging on the girl in the bed. Her body began to tremble as if an unseen force was ripping through her, and I watched in horror as her eyes snapped open. They weren't her eyes anymore. They held a darkness that chilled me to the bone. "Help us," she said, her voice layered with the others, a cacophony of despair filtering through her as if she were a vessel. In that moment, clarity gripped me, cutting through the confusion. I understood. She wasn't just a patient. She was a manifestation of all the pain in this hospital. She was the one that everyone the whispers had been calling out to. Then everything went dark. The lights flickered violently before plunging us all into an inky void. I could still hear them, the cries echoing in my ears, but I could see nothing. Panic surged through me, and I reached out into the nothingness, desperate to find a way out. Just as I thought I might be engulfed by the darkness, I felt a pull, a force drawing me back. Then I stumbled, landing hard on the floor of the empty hallway, breathing heavily as the fluorescent lights flickered back on. The room was gone. The girl was gone. The shadows, the voices, they had vanished. What just happened? I whispered to myself, still trying to process the void that enveloped me moments before. Before I could regain my composure, I felt a presence behind me, and instinctively, I turned around. That S when I saw it. Something moved in the corner of my vision, something that shouldn't have been there. A flicker of darkness, watching me, waiting. And then I heard another whisper, soft but resolute, "You have to help us." I stepped back, my heart racing. The figure in the shadows was shifting, a darker shade against the pale walls of the hospital corridor. The whisper echoed in my mind, heavy with urgency. "You have to help us." I swallowed hard. My first instinct was to flee, to run down the hallway and put as much distance as possible between me and whatever that was. But a morbid curiosity held me in place. "What do you want?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper, wavering with uncertainty. There was a pause before the figure slowly moved closer, a creeping shadow that took its time, as if savoring my fear. A soft chuckle broke through the stillness. "They won't let you leave." It was a woman's voice, yet it sounded broken, marred by something dark. I squinted, trying to make out her form, and as she advanced, the hallway seemed to bend gently, warping around her like she was the epicenter of some unseen force. "Who? What do you mean?" I managed to ask. The words tumbled out of my mouth as I took another step backward, my feet finally responding to the rising panic. "Inside," she urged, nodding her head toward a door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway. Dim light spilled out from the opening, illuminating swirling dust motes that danced in the air. "They need you to know." I hesitated, fear battling against a creeping sense of dread, and the innate need to uncover the truth. "What's inside?" I asked uneasily. "Everything," she replied simply, her voice trailing off into echoing silence. Compelled by a force I couldn't resist, I took a deep breath and started walking toward the door. Each step felt like an act of bravery, my mind racing with what I might find. As I got closer, the whispers returned, echoing in harmony, coaxing me with a familiar insistence. "You have to help us." I reached the door and pushed it open, heart pounding. The room inside was stark, littered with shadows that crawled across the walls. An old wooden table sat at the center, cluttered with medical files, old photo frames, and something that looked like a medical device I didn't recognize. The air felt thick. I could sense history, hear a pulse of memories trapped between the walls. As my eyes roamed the room, I spotted a mirror on the far wall. My reflection looked back at me, but it was different. The shadows seemed to cling to my form, twisting around my body and distorting my features. Suddenly, The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. I spun around, heart racing as panic surged. I was locked in. That S when I heard it. A faint tapping, rhythmic yet erratic, coming from inside the room. It was coming from underneath the table. I crouched down, my instincts screaming at me to leave, but I couldn't. I had to know what was going on. I reached for the edge of the table and lifted it slightly, my hands trembling. What I saw there made me gasp. A small, leather-bound journal with a name written in bold letters on the cover. It was a name I recognized. Before I could fully process what it meant, the mirror behind me darkened, the reflection shifting into a new scene. I gasped, realizing I was not just seeing my own reality anymore. Shapes began to form behind me in the glass, familiar faces entwined in anguish, trapped in an endless loop of despair. And then I heard them again. Help us! I spun around, but the room was empty, all except for the journal clutched in my hands. I had to know what was written inside. What if it held the answers? But as I flipped it open, I felt darkness creeping up from the floor, wrapping around my ankles like cold hands pulling me deeper into the abyss. It was too late. I was not in control anymore. In that moment, I realized the pull was stronger than I could fight. I had to finish what I started. The ink on the pages was smudged, but I could still make out the words. Names, dates, notes that scratched at the walls of my memory. The journal felt alive in my hands, vibrating with secrets I was not prepared to face. I had to focus, to read. As patients lose their way, shadows grow stronger. The first line read. My pulse quickened. It was as if the words were reaching through time, speaking of things I hadn't yet understood. Was this a warning? Then the tapping returned louder this time. I glanced under the table, heart racing. Nothing. Just more dust and shadows. I forced myself to look back at the journal. Names and dates continued to swim before my eyes, creating a dizzying pattern. My vision blurred. Suddenly, a name caught my breath. It was my mother's. The ink indicated a date from years ago, a date I would never forget. I stumbled back, clutching the journal to my chest. They've been searching for you, whispered the woman's voice from the shadows. I turned, heart thundering. She was there, but this time her features were forming more clearly. She looked familiar. I don't understand, I managed to say. Her eyes, dark pools framed by weary lines, held an intensity that pierced through the chaos. You were meant to find this. You must remember. Your family. Before she finished, the lights in the room flickered, casting strange shapes along the walls. The mirror rippled, and I caught a glimpse of myself no longer in the room, but in a memory. My mother in a hospital gown, lying helpless. A surge of panic gripped me. Stop. I need to know the truth. I yelled, my voice raw, desperation spilling out. Finish reading, she replied, her voice echoing with a weight I couldn't shake off. I looked down at the journal, hands trembling. The next line shifted. They cannot let you leave until you understand. My breath hitched. Understand what? But as I turned the page, the words melted away into dark ink, dissolving before my eyes. I felt the darkness pooling around me, squeezing tighter. I blinked, and the room shifted. Suddenly, I was there again, in that sterile hospital, with the smell of antiseptic filling my lungs and a pulse monitoring machine beeping rhythmically. My mother was in the bed, motionless the way I last saw her on that fateful day. Help us. The phrase rolled through the air, haunting me. You must help us break free. The shadows in the room thickened as if sensing my fear. I could feel them crawling up my legs, trying to pull me into the memory. I fought against it, closing my eyes and shaking my head. I didn't want to relive that moment. Then everything went dark. I opened my eyes to find myself not in the room but back in the hallway, breathless and disoriented. I stood by the door, hands still clutching the journal. The whispers resumed, swirling around me like smoke. Help us. I stepped back, doubt gnawing at me. I thought I had escaped, but whatever this was, it wasn't finished with me yet. Hold on, I whispered into the shadows. What do you want from me? But the answer wouldn't come. Instead, I felt the temperature drop, and the figure appeared again, closer this time. I was running out of time, and each breath I took echoed louder, pulling me into their world. I had to decide. Would I continue down this path or find a way out? But just as I turned toward the hallway, a hand reached out from the shadows, grabbing me. "Help us!" The voices grew frantic. I was caught, unable to escape. And that S when I realized, they weren't just shadows. They were a part of something much larger. Something I was now tangled in. I blinked hard, fighting the grip around my wrist, as the hand pulled me deeper into the shadowy abyss. Fear coursed through me, a surge of adrenaline that screamed for me to escape. But I was pinned, helpless against the weight of the shadows that enveloped me. "Help us!" The voices echoed, blending together until they became a haunting chorus. I wanted to tell them I didn't know how, but the words wouldn't come. Then, the shadows seemed to pulse, and I found myself in a new setting, a distinct place where the air felt heavy and stale. This time, the room was filled with flickering lights overhead, casting harsh reflections off sterile metal. It was a hospital room again, but this one bore no resemblance to the one from my memories. I looked around, thinking I might find someone to guide me, but there was only emptiness. The machines murmured softly, their screens displaying vital signs that fluctuated unnaturally. How did I get here? I muttered to myself, feeling increasingly trapped. I noticed a curtain drawn across one corner, and an instinct pulled me toward it. The whispers continued, clearer now, weaving through the air like smoke around my legs. Their urgency was palpable. "It's not too late," they urged. "You must understand." With trembling fingers, I pulled back the curtain, revealing a bed identical to my mother's. In it lay a figure, cocooned in blankets, lifeless and still. My heart raced as I stepped closer, dread pooling within me like ice water. As I neared, the figure stirred slightly and the face turned toward me. I gasped. It was me. No. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't possible. My reflection stared back at me with hollow eyes filled with despair. "Get away!" I screamed, but my two selves were locked in an unblinking stare, as though I were facing a dark mirror reflecting everything I feared. "Help us!" The voice rasped, echoing my own. A sliver of recognition hit me. This wasn't just a reminder. It felt like a warning. I stumbled backward, the reality of my surroundings shifting once more, twisting and writhing like something alive. I hit the floor hard, the sound of my body hitting the ground muffled by the low hum of machinery. Then everything went dark again. When I opened my eyes this time, I found myself in the dim hallway of the hospital, the lights flickering overhead like a digital heartbeat. The journal lay beside me, open to the page I'd been reading. I picked it up, eyes darting across the lines desperately. "Your family," I whispered, trying to connect the fragments swirling in my mind. A name floated to the surface, something I'd glossed over in the chaos. Lillian, my mother's sister, the woman I had never met. The shadows whispered again. "Find her." Before I could process it, the temperature plummeted, and the shadows thickened, creeping toward me with renewed ferocity. "You're not safe here," I shouted, trying to fend them off. But in my desperation, I saw movement from the corner of my eye. A figure walked toward me, a silhouette carved from darkness. I felt the pull again, like something was drawing me closer against my will. "Help us!" The cry broke through the room. I couldn't tell if it was my voice or there's any more. Then I heard it, a name urgent and clear. Lillian. I wanted to scream, to fight against the tide pulling me under. But instead, I dared to step forward, driven by the flickering glimmer of hope. I could no longer deny the truth. I needed to find out who Lillian was and why her name echoed through the shadows. As I moved toward the figure, the darkness around me lifted slightly, revealing a path that beckoned me. I took a deep breath, resolution hardening in my chest. This time I wasn't running away. I was going to find out what was buried in the shadows. And chasing after the truth might just cost me everything. I stepped forward, heart pounding and fear clawing at my chest. The air felt thicker as the figure drew closer. I squinted, trying to make out details in the dim light. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. The figure halted, obscured in a haze of shadows. "Lillian," it whispered, the name echoing through the hall, sending chills down my spine. "You must remember." "I don't know you," I shouted, desperation spilling from my lips. I felt a shift, the shadows around me pulsing with intensity, pressing closer as if trying to swallow me whole. "Not yet," Lillian said, her voice barely audible. "But you need to." Pain pierced through my head, a sharp reminder of the hospital room. My mother. The whispers. They tangled in my mind, threads connecting me to this unknown woman. I had to know who she was, why she mattered. But before I could reach for her, the lights above flickered violently, plunging me into darkness once again. Panic flared in my chest. I strained to see, feeling trapped in an inky void. A sudden crash echoed, like something falling in the distance. I instinctively took a step back, but the shadows surged, refusing to let me retreat. "Lillian," I shouted, my voice wavering. I was teetering on the edge of reality and dreams, and I needed answers. As if on cue, the shadows withdrew for a breath, and I found myself in a new corridor. This one was eerily familiar, the layout of the hospital I had known since childhood. Dryness scraped in my throat. This was the place where I had first grasped the concept of loss. "Find her," the voices urged again, but now they were weaker, feather-light. I squinted down the hall, the light flickering sporadically. There was one door slightly ajar. My heart raced as I approached it, desperation mingling with dread. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was dark, but I could make out shapes, a familiar sight of medical equipment and the sterile smell of antiseptic. And in the far corner a figure lay still. I hesitated, the name caught in my throat. I stepped closer, and the dim light unveiled the face resting on the pillow. It was Lillian, her eyes closed and features relaxed, just like my mother's in my memories. "Lillian," I called softly, but there was no response. I reached out but hesitated, fear faintly tickling my fingertips. "Wake up," I whispered, a mix of urgency and sorrow. That S when I saw it, a tattered photograph resting on the bedside table next to her. I picked it up, the edges curled with age. It was a picture of my mother as a child, beaming beside an adorable girl with bright laugh lines. The girl was Lillian. But the other half of the photograph was marred with dark smudges that twisted into forms I couldn't quite place. Shadows? Or something worse? Suddenly, a sound rang out from behind me. The air shifted, cold and unwelcoming. Someone was there. My heart raced, adrenaline blurring my thoughts. I turned, scanning the dim hallway, but it was too late. The shadows coiled around me again, a menacing presence that filled the room. I was not alone. Desperate, I clutched the photograph, my only anchor to this reality. But as I looked back at Lillian, I knew whatever lay ahead would demand more than just answers. It wanted to twist the truth into something unrecognizable. "Who are you?" I fell to my knees, ready to confront the shadows that were smothering me. Everything felt like it was about to break. The shadows surged around me, a living entity hungry for all that was still left within me. I could feel the weight of their presence, heavy and unyielding. "Who are you?" I repeated, my voice quivering, lost in the echo of the walls. Nobody answered, but an awareness gripped me. The photograph still clutched in my hands felt warm, like a beacon amid the encroaching darkness. I turned back to Lillian, the sleeping figure now radiating a soft glow. Whatever she represented, her existence etched in that photograph was a thread connecting me to something beyond fear. I had to reach her. "Lillian," I called again, determination rising within me. "You have to wake up." As if my words were the key, Lillian's eyes fluttered open. They were deep pools of sorrow and memory, brimming with untold stories. I could barely breathe as I locked gazes with her. I felt the whispers spiral around me with renewed urgency, echoing words lost in time. Helpless, a shiver coursed through her, and she sat up slowly, looking around. "You've come," she breathed, voice thick with realization. You finally found me. Why are you hiding? I asked, desperation pushing through the shadows that sought to ensnare me. What is this place? It's a prison, Lillian said, lifting her hand as if to touch mine. But I flinched, the shadows crawling at my feet. We are trapped here. There are more like us faces that cry out in the dark. The darkness pressed closer, and I felt disoriented. What do they want? How do I help? Her gaze flicked behind me, the warmth fading. They need to be remembered. If you don't release us, the hospital will keep feeding off us, turning us further into shadows. Fear swelled inside me. And if I don't, then you may become one of us, she warned, and a flicker of anguish crossed her features. Bound by the whispers, lost like everyone else. Before I could respond, a rush of icy air swept past me, and the room began to tremble. The darkness does not want you to find the truth, Lillian shouted. With that declaration, shadows swirled aggressively, weaving together with tormented energy, faces and figures swirling within them, all pleading for release. I needed to act fast. I couldn't lose this grasp of understanding. What must I do? I cried, summoning courage through the encroaching terror. You must confront the source, the heart of their despair, Lillian urged, her eyes filled with fierce determination. It's hidden in the shadows of the hospital. Find the old ward. It's where the stories began. Where is it? I shouted, instinctively holding the photograph tightly. She pointed with a trembling hand. Follow the whispers. Suddenly, the weight of shadows around me tightened like a vice. You will not leave. A hoarse voice thundered from within the darkness, sending shockwaves through the air. Dread threatened to engulf me, but I held on to Lillian's words. Without thinking, I bolted for the door, images of faces swarming through my mind, urging me onward. They were not just shadows. They were lives that had been uprooted, stories left unwritten. I felt the pull toward the old ward, igniting a spark of bravery as I plunged into the dimly lit corridors. As I sprinted, the whispers rose and fell around me, echoing the throes of pain that spurred me to keep moving. Remember us, they pleaded. Becoming aware of my surroundings, I turned sharply down another hall, knowing I had to find the forgotten ward. The air grew heavier as I traversed through the heart of the hospital, each step drawing me deeper into a territory cloaked in darkness and sorrow. When I finally reached a door at the end of a long corridor, it was covered in dust, as though long neglected. A single flickering light above it created a maddening rhythm, drawing closer to the center of it all. With a shaky hand, I pushed the door open. The room inside was dark, enclosed by shadows that coiled and twisted waiting for my arrival. The faint outline of beds stood in a phantom line, long abandoned, but memories hung heavy in the air like a thick fog. As I stepped inside, I heard them again. The whispers, intensified. Release us. The anguish filled my heart as I inhaled sharply. Their desperate cries swirled around me, pulling me closer to the center of the room where the echo of unresolved lives begged for recognition. I closed my eyes, trying to gather my thoughts as I focused inwardly. I could feel each heartbeat of the past thrum against the walls, clawing at the air. I felt the weight of those who had suffered here. Something deeper stirred within me, urging me to remember. Then I understand. Lillian's story, I whispered instinctively, my voice breaking. Somehow I had always known there was a deeper connection to my family and this place. I called out again, who are you? Show yourselves. The shadows shifted violently, and faces began to emerge, lost patience. Broken spirits who looked toward me, their eyes wide and mouths working silently, trapped within the darkness. Remember us, they cried. Set us free. Desperation surged through me as I felt the weight of their pain. I remember I said, the words pouring out. You are not forgotten. I won't leave you here. Suddenly, the shadows rippled and twisted, a surge of power rushing forward. I reached into the center of the room, the ground trembling beneath me. In that moment, everything became clear. You want to be remembered, to have your stories told. As if reacting to my revelations, a blinding light burst forth. illuminating the room and pushing back the shadows, unveiling the faces of those once entangled in despair. Their forms glowed, eyes filled with gratitude. One voice rose above the rest, Lillian S. "You've embraced us. Thank you." The shadows began to disperse, the atmosphere lightening, the pain of ages lifting away like a fog in the sun. And then I felt it, the release, the warm glow surrounding me, enveloping the pain and whispers, a symphony of grateful spirits escaping into the light. But amid the bright light, I couldn't shake an ominous thought. What now? I muttered, the echoing silence a stark contrast to the earlier torment. Some part of me knew the shadows would always linger, and I bet my heart they hadn't vanished entirely. I could feel unanswered questions swirling in the corners of my mind. What would happen to the hospital now? What would remain beneath its surface? As the light receded, I turned to leave, the room now a vestige of memories rather than trauma. I walked out and pushed the door closed gently, casting a glance behind me. The air was still thicker than before, shadows still lurking in the corners just waiting. I took a deep breath, ready to face what came next. I had lifted a weight, but understood there was more left to uncover. I was different, transformed through experience, but what else lay ahead still felt unknown. I stepped back into the hallway, ready to confront the reality outside those walls and continue the journey. I didn't know how far I'd go or where it would lead me, but I refused to turn back. The echoes of their stories would stay with me forever, lighting a path forward, and I could already hear the whispers urging me on, like a soft, guiding hand in the dark.